Let me ask you about Venezuela.
Yes.
Where you have been very focused and very central to the president's policy. The president said that Venezuela now is the United States, the most powerful military in the world, to protect them. And to protect them, we will. Is the United States military providing security guarantees for American companies?
We're not doing that right now, but what he means is we're changing the game for what's happening in the ground in Venezuela. Venezuela has purchased $20 billion of Russian weapons. They got Cuban mercenaries there. They supply oil to Cuba. They harbor the Hezbollah's headquarters for the Western Hemisphere. Venezuela has been a very dangerous, very destabilized place going down the tubes. And with the United States' influence now by controlling the sale of their oil and therefore the flow of funds into the country, we think we will see relatively rapid change, improvement on the ground in Venezuela. This is a process. We're only 8 days into the process, but it's off to a strong start.
I want to talk a bit about these points. Of course, there was a lot said at this particular meeting. And Trump, of course, as I mentioned just then, said America will decide which oil companies can go into Venezuela to extract oil. Do you see there being a bit of a global pushback here on his big move?
Good afternoon. Yeah, there is already substantial international and industry pushback against this model, which many see as open neo-colonial and neo-imperial. So after the US kidnapped Nicolas Maduro in that cross-border operation that clearly violates international law and the UN Charter, Trump announced that Washington would control oil sales indefinitely and decide which corporations extract it, which goes far beyond any plausible self-defense or humanitarian justification. So we need to remember that for Venezuela, this comes on top of years of unilateral coercive measures. For example, oil sanctions since 2017 have cost the country tens of billions of dollars in lost revenue and foreign exchange. So at the same time, major oil companies are signaling their own kind of pushback. Executives from firms like ExxonMobil describe Venezuela as uninvestable under current conditions, despite Trump's promise of total safety. And experts stress that restoring production from under 1 million barrels a day to earlier levels, which would be approximately 3 million, would require years and tens of billions in investment that no one wants to risk under a foreign-run, legally contested framework. So globally, resistance is legal, political, and economic. Many actors see this not as benign reconstruction effort, but as an experiment in 21st century imperial resource.
So it does seem that, I guess, Donald Trump's simplicity of the plan doesn't seem quite, as much as he's talking about it being quite simplistic. I want to also talk about him claiming that the US has earned Venezuela's respect following this operation to seize their president. Of course, we're seeing these multiple protests even within Venezuela all around the globe. Do you really think that this is the majority consensus from those at home in Venezuela?
No. Trump's narrative bears little resemblance to the fragmented reality inside the country. So I'm talking about Venezuela. The operation was in legal terms a kidnapping, as I said before, but on the ground reactions have been mixed and deeply ambivalent inside and outside Venezuela. So some Venezuelans who suffer under Maduro's rule express relief and even gratitude in the first hours. But thousands of Maduro supporters immediately denounced the act as kidnapping and marched demanding his release. And even many opponents are uneasy about a scenario where a foreign power both removes their head of state and assumes long-term control over the main source of income.
And what about within the US as well, and Venezuelans who are within that nation?
Yes, among US citizens, opinion is sharply divided, and overall support for the strike and the broader project is weak. Polling shows only roughly about a third of respondents approve of the military action in Venezuela, with a similar share opposed and a clear majority worried the US will get too deeply involved. And another survey I checked finds most respondents still oppose a full-scale invasion, even if support has risen somewhat, especially among Republican voters.
I want to also talk about other countries and their responses here. And one of the mentions of Trump today that was quite significant was Trump and Colombia's president. They're set to now arrange a White House meeting after threats of military action. There was claims here that Gustavo Petro called Trump to explain the situation of drugs and other disagreements. How do you think this relationship is now faring, and I guess what would be Petro's aim here?
I think that the relationship is still very volatile. It was worse, but as you mentioned before, yes, just a few days ago they were talking by phone. So I think the relationship is fundamentally shaped by asymmetry and the new imperial context in the region. And this is about the new national security strategy. So Petro's aims are defensive and strategic. I would say 3 points. I would say deterrence and de-escalation, narrative struggle, and a regional principle. So Petro is trying to mobilize Colombian society around sovereignty and then engaging Trump directly. And he got that call the other day. He's trying to raise the political cost in Washington of threatening Colombia as the next Venezuelan scenario. And also this narrative struggle, he wants to counter the portrayal of Colombia as narco state run personally by him, because that was the accusation that Trump was talking about. And also about the regional principle, which is very important. Petro has framed the Venezuela operation as a war over oil and coal and an assault on Latin American sovereignty. So he will likely use the White House visit to argue against normalizing a doctrine where the US kidnaps one president and then seizes control of the natural resources of that country.
All right, it's such a fast-moving situation. We appreciate your time here on Newsnight One.
Thank you very much.
Trump claims the US now effectively controls Venezuela after the dramatic seizure of its leader, Nicolas Maduro. You can make good arguments for Trump's intervention in Venezuela, but critics warn Trump's strategy could embolden China and Russia to expand their influence in Europe and Asia. To discuss this and more, I'm joined now by former Foreign Affairs Minister Alexander Downer. Alexander, thanks so much for coming on the program. What have you made of Trump's actions in Venezuela? And what do you make of those who say he single-handedly destroyed the rules-based order that had kept our world safe for the last 60, 70 years?
Well, I think what he's done in Venezuela is very bold, and hopefully it will succeed, overthrowing a socialist dictator who stole the last presidential election where 70% of people voted against him, and who's reduced the GDP of Venezuela over 10 years by between 70 and 80%, and has caused something like 8 million people, that's 20% of the population of Venezuela, to leave the country. Overthrowing him is no bad thing. I mean, there was a time when liberal democracies and freedom-loving people saw the world in terms of, well, we've got to fight authoritarian regimes and fight for democracy and for freedom. And the fact is, over the last 2 decades, we've stopped doing that. We've got into this sort of world of moral equivalence. It doesn't matter what sort of regime they have in Venezuela or in Iran or in Russia or China. That's all fine by us, and it's no better or no worse than ours. We used to have faith in our liberal democratic system. We used to believe in the struggle for freedom. And if I may say so, Donald Trump has returned to those ideas. I mean, he says out of left field things from time to time. There's no doubt about that. But there is also no doubt that he is absolutely determined that the side of freedom is going to start to prevail. Because under the old rules-based system, as you describe it, well, Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, they've totally disregarded it.
Yes.
They've disregarded it. We've applied it, and they've disregarded it, and they've made a mockery of us over the last 20 years.